The True Story of Ato by Carolyn C. Howe. Ato is a Chinese immigrant who came to the Philippines. He had been at some point in his life a coolie, a baker, a shopkeeper's apprentice, a taho vendor, a vegetable hawker, a guerrilla, and a communist fugitive. He was the owner of a drugstore in Ilocano, where 6 or 7 old men, which they called the 48, congregated every evening after supper. Ato left the Tang Mountains for Manila in the late 1920s. He spoke of fighting alongside the hooks, of going into Mount Arayat only 3 steps ahead of the Japanese. The man in Ato's company had fallen into a 12-course banquet. The man in Ato's company had fallen into a malarial delirium in the swamps of Candaba when they finally awoke from the war. Ato and a number of his friends found themselves on the run because the government, with more than a little help from a few zealous turtles among Lanang, or our people, had decided that the country really was crawling with disloyal and ungrateful communists like Ato. Those years spent in hiding are a blur. The political winds relented a little. Ato picked himself up in a small town in Cebu and dusted his many aliases and family histories off his sleeve. He later found out that 2 of his friends had been deported to Taiwan, while several others had disappeared into the crevices of the southern provinces. Ato was one of the few, the 48 among them, who made their way to Manila to begin yet another lifetime of eking out a living. It could have been worse. It is not that easy. By 1984, he and Whiskers Wang and Ah Sun had rooted through their deepest pockets to open a drugstore. And for the first time in his 46 years, he had wept at the news about the establishment of diplomatic ties with China. In early May of 1984, he went to visit his homeland, China. He visited Chinkang not knowing that he was acting like a tourist in more than a legal sense, armed with a camera that was all set to capture the white sands, pristine waters, and curving eaves in Kodak color. During his stay there, he had to stay with his 80-year-old sister-in-law the first few days because her grandson, who kept the key to the old house, had gone to look at the new taxicabs. Apparently, nobody had bothered to install plumbing and electricity either, which meant that Grand Uncle Ato could not spend the night in the old house. The relatives of their own homes had figured that keeping the old house locked was all the caretaking that they could spare. Some nights of the 2 weeks that Ato spent in Chinkang, he slept on a folding bed that he borrowed from his sister-in-law, a bed just like the one he had slept on for years in Alcan. He found his father's tomb on the sandy path that led to the beach, his mother's on the edge of his neighbor's peanut field. He visited the temple and lit joss sticks, just like he did to the replicas in Manila. But like all tourists, Ato left Chinkang at the end of 2 weeks, feeling as though he had outstayed his welcome. He returned to Manila with an album that was passed around for the next few evenings. There were carefully mounted pictures of beaches, trees, houses, and people, just like postcards. Here in this album were the pictures to prove that it was all there, as he had dreamed and imagined.
Caroline C. Howe is Associate Professor for Southeast Asian Studies at Kyoto University, Japan. She obtained her BA English summa cum laude from UP in 1990 and her PhD English Language and Literature from Cornell University on a Fulbright scholarship in 1998. She is currently working on a book on literature and naturalism. Writes for associate editor of the internet journal League Manila.
Hi! So, to sum it all, Chinese-Filipino literature refers to three things. It refers to first, the works by Chinese residing in the Philippines. Second, it refers to works in Chinese by Filipino Chinese. And lastly, it refers to works in any languages, may it be English, Filipino, or Chinese, written by Filipino Chinese.
Generations of Chinese-Filipino writers. First generation are the generation of immigrants who came in the 30s and who were educated in China. And second, the generation are the Filipino-born Chinese who received education and who started writing in the 60s. And finally, or the third generation, is the generation of writers consisting mostly of the new immigrants from China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan came during 70s and
The themes of the Filipino-Chinese literature includes primarily memories of China and their desire to go back to China. Second is the anti-violence literature. The third is the social problems in living in the Philippines. Third is the anti-Japanese sentiments. And lastly, the relationship between Chinese and the Philippines.
多情的伤。